question, of which I know kept everyone in suspense and certainly was a surprise. Nevertheless, I was hoping that many of you would have given thought to the question, because I believe that the questions I raised, and I will shortly repeat them again, really defines for us the age of Aquarius and what that will mean ultimately for us. In chapter 10 of Numbers, Beha'alotcha, where it says in verse 29, and Moses said unto Chovav, his father-in-law, another name for Yitro or Jethro, Nosim anachnu el hamakom asher amar Hashem. We are now journeying unto the place, to that place which Lord has said he will give unto us. And therefore, come thou with us, and we will do thee good. For the Lord hath spoken good concerning Israel. Here's Moses pleading with his father-in-law, who had already become a convert, to please journey with him. And the response of Jethro was, I will not go, but I will depart to my own land, to my own kindred. And then again, in verse 31, along comes Moses and says, I pray thee, do not leave us. For as much as thou knowest how we are encamped in this wilderness, and please be to us eyes, direct us. And there is no response from Jethro this time. And in fact, Moses continues to say that if you will go with us, all of the good that has been promised us will also benefit you. And that's where the subject ends. And so we raised the following questions. Firstly, why didn't Jethro go with Moses? He was asking him, and then he turns around and says, no, I want to go back home. He was now already a convert. And wasn't he expecting to enter the land of Israel? Meaning that if he was a convert, and we know that the difference between the Jew and the non-Jew is essentially the difference between the desire to receive in its intensity, where a Jew on Mount Sinai underwent a transformation, a new creation called Jew, which heretofore did not exist as a nation, and that was the most intensified desire to receive that could become manifest by humankind. And consequently, when Yitro became a ger, he then was considered to be within the congregation of Israel. And so why didn't he agree to the request of Moses? And furthermore, what was Moses' plea a second time, upon which there is suddenly an abrupt halt to the subject, no response from Jethro, nothing further said, other than the verse, which is verse 33, and they set forward from the mount of the Lord 3 days, and the Ark of the Covenant went before them to seek out a resting place for them. Indeed, a mystery. The commentaries on this particular subject ask the questions we have raised. And the only explanation that seems to come to my mind is something that we read in the portion of the week, which was Shlach Lecha, which was last week, which we did not discuss, and I want to spend some time because the questions we raised are directly linked to what happened in the following portion of the week, which concerns the spies that went to Israel to investigate whether the land was the right place for them or not. And so I want to read from the Zohar for the obvious reason that this will raise our own consciousness, and whatever is being said here this evening will be understood on a higher level of understanding rather than our usual mundane consciousness. Tochazi, the Zohar says, come and see. Eliezer Eved Avraham ibnei Canaan haya. If you recall that Abraham had a servant whose name was Eliezer, and when Abraham sought a bride for his son Isaac, he sent his trusted servant Eliezer, who was from the nation of Canaan, and the Zohar continues, there was a curse on Canaan, she'arur Canaan eved avadim yeh lachiv. But because, continues the Zohar, mishum shehaya shliach ne'eman, and because this non-Jew was a trusted servant, what does it say? Ma katuv bo Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem mamash. He was blessed by Hashem. Balkei nechtab b'Torah mishum sheyatsa miklala hazu, and because he was a trusted servant, he went out of this curse, v'nidbarech, and he was blessed. And the Zohar continues, v'lo dailo, and it is not sufficient, sheyatsa miklala, that he simply went out of this curse, which was a blessing by and within itself, Ela shenidbarech b'shmo shel akadosh baruch hu, v'lamadati sheba malach v'hichnis davar zeh, dahainu sheyikru Baruch Hashem bepiv shel Lavan. Who gave him the blessing? Who said Baruch Hashem, that you should be blessed by Hashem? Lavan, the individual about whom we learn in the Agadah that his intent was to destroy the very seed of Israel, to destroy Jacob, and consequently there would be no Israel. Within this one little verse of the Zohar lies, I believe, the answer to the mystery of what Jethro was all about. What did the fact of being a trusted servant, whose duty it was to be a trusted servant, that this in turn brought about that Laban, the archenemy of Israel, would be the channel by which he would be blessed. Why couldn't he be blessed by Abraham? The Lord needed Laban to bless Eliezer. In another case, we have, which is further on in Numbers, the famous prayer. In fact, the first prayer that all Jews recite upon entering a synagogue or a Bet HaKnesset is Matovu Lecha Yaakov. How goodly are the tents of Jacob. And who was the author of that phrase? Another arch enemy of Israel, who openly came to curse the people of Israel, and was Bilam. And through him came the blessing of Matovo Lecha Yaakov, that to this very day, the sages sought fit in the prayer book to insert this blessing of Bilam. Why was it required? Or what was the necessity of using a non-Jew to provide the blessing, as if it couldn't come through Abraham? Or couldn't it have come through Moses, who was there at the time? Why was it necessary that these people act as channels? And the Zohar says this in many areas, that because these people were essentially non-Jewish, and consequently, while being Jewish is not necessarily evil, despite the fact that the Bible certainly makes a very deep impression upon anyone reading the Bible, that the Jews there could be no nation worse than the Jews, because we have discussed it time and time again, as we will again in this week's portion, that they never stop. In other words, what did you do for me today? Immediately following the 10 plagues, the Jew says, what did you do for me today, God? They cross the Red Sea, splitting of the Red Sea. The next day is, what are you doing for me today, God? Forgetting immediately. And in this week's portion again. In fact, when Moshe asked Jethro to be the eyes of Israel, it followed a similar incident where they were complaining about, the wonderful fish in Egypt. This was on these people's minds. A very bad description of the nation of Israel, and a very bad description of the people who are going to exemplify and be the channel for this beautiful teaching called the Torah. So we're thoroughly convinced that while the Jew could have the potential of reaching heights of consciousness, the level of which no other nation could reach, but they seem to be doing a bad job of it. And the track record, not only contained within the Torah, but the track record of the last 2,000 years, again spells out the same pattern. The Jew never changes. He is always finding someone else to blame for his problems. He is always finding fault with whatever situation he finds himself. And yet we are to be considered the nation of God. Which leads us to an answer or a comprehension of what the Zohar is trying to reveal for us. While Laban or Bilam had evil intentions, but with that kind of a channel, the Lord did not find any difficulty in channeling his energy. It was simple. And in fact, we know the reason he chose the Jew to be the channel, because wherever there could be the lowest of desire to receive, or shall I say the greediest form of desire to receive, so therein lies the opportunity of achieving a desire to receive for the sake of sharing to the greatest degree. However, that aspect of the desire to receive for oneself alone always accompanies whatever action the Jew does, because it begins initially and essentially with a desire to receive, for the reason that 7 people changed the face of this world, or the face of the earth. So we are told, 7 people. Those 7 people were all Jews. And it is not by coincidence that they were Jews. They were channels. Whether they were channels for what some might consider to be evil, and in my particular case, in reference to Einstein, I didn't believe that his changing the face of the earth, which was radical, which was something that didn't exist before, nevertheless, it brought more problems than it has brought the euphoria that we're all looking for. This beautiful state of peace and tranquility. It's brought waste, it's brought everything, and I'm referring to the splitting of the atom. The non-Jew, because he does not have that kind of intensity of desire to receive, while in effect he could transform that desire to receive for sharing, but nevertheless, the fact that he makes use of its sharing does not preclude that the desire to receive for oneself alone is not present. It always remains present. The question is, what does the Jew do with it? While he has failed dismally is one side of the picture. The fact that he would be successful, let's say like Moshe or Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, doesn't preclude that these individuals did not have that kind of desire to receive. And therefore, when Moshe requested Jethro to be the eyes, what he was in effect saying, it's true that a non-Jew does not have that kind of intensity and therefore cannot draw that kind of energy. But he was a convert. Jethro was a convert. And the fact that he was a convert meant that he kept all of the assets, all of the positivities of a non-Jew, along with this new negativity that he was going to acquire. So whereas one who is born Jewish could possibly reach a higher level of consciousness of which no other nation could achieve, nevertheless, that spark of desire to receive for oneself alone could turn the whole table, as it always has done in the Bible for the Jew. And what Moses felt was here was the opportunity for someone who went through that stage, and that stage didn't disappear. With being a convert doesn't mean that he suddenly forgets his past or he's told to forget his past. Those assets he brought with him. And those assets did not include, as we shall shortly learn, Lashon Hara. Within that portion of Beha'alotcha, of Numbers, chapter 10, we also read there that Miriam, the brother of Moses, was punished because of evil tongue. Evil tongue seems to be the trait of Jewish people all the way through the Bible, and maybe all the way through to our present day. In Shlach Lecha, when the Jews went to explore or spy out the land of Israel, they too came back, says the Zohar with Lashon Hara, and therefore this portion of the week called Shlach Lecha, the portion concerning itself with the spies, follows immediately that section which dealt with the Lashon Hara, with the evil tongue of Miriam. They were connected one with each other. And now here was Miriam, prophetess, beautiful family, brother the high priest, another brother the leader of Israel. And how can she succumb to that kind of malicious Lashon Hara? The answer is that while she had attained and achieved those higher levels of consciousness of which only the Jew can achieve, nevertheless, the liability of the desire to receive, of always finding fault, which is what Lashon Hara is all about. Finding fault, Lashon Hara, incidentally, does not mean malicious slander, which is not true. Lashon Hara deals with that which is true, but not for the sake of sharing information, because it is obvious that if an employer is about to hire an individual and he has a friend who was a former employer of this individual, and he asks, what does he know about him? He says, well, I know the reason I fired him was because he stole. Would that be considered Lashon Hara? And the answer is, depending on the intent of that former employer. Was it just to fix him, get even with him, or bury him? Or was it for the sake of sharing information? We shall learn that these Meraglim, according to the Zohar, and these were chieftains, all of them, and we shall explore it more thoroughly, they had only one thing in mind: their own personal esteem. And therefore, when they came back with the slanderous report concerning Israel, they were punished along with the rest of the nation of Israel who went along with them. Why did they all go along with them? Because instinctively, while they weren't present, they hadn't explored the land of Israel. And here came back 10 people of the 12 who had almost everything evil to say about the land of Israel, and they all agreed. No one questioned. They believed. 10 people. There should have been one who should get up beside Caleb, and Yoshua, the two other spies who came up, who tried to present the better side of the picture. But the negative side of the picture was immediately accepted by the entire nation of Israel. Because that comes from this intrinsic characteristic called Jew. The desire to receive for oneself alone is always present. It always raises its ugly head. And it requires a great deal of restriction, which the Jew, obviously, from the point of view of the Torah, never had, and we are discussing the Dor Deya, as both the Talmud and the Zohar expresses the definition of the people of the Exodus. They were the most advanced, knowledgeable, and achieving levels of consciousness of which no other generation that followed would have achieved other than in the age of Aquarius. And yet, these thinking people, Dor Deya, immediately grasped the negativity of the land of Israel, the same way as Miriam. So, when it came to Jethro, he felt that this intrinsic characteristic would not affect Jethro, and therefore he could weigh things as they are. He would be the eyes. What does it mean, the eyes? He would not be prejudicial on any subject, as Moshe noticed with the Jews from the moment they were in Egypt. The hard time he had in Egypt, and certainly the hard times he had with this nation of Israel, following day by day this expression of the characteristic of negativity, which is so ugly from the point of view of the Torah, that if I wasn't Jewish, I could say I'm an anti-Semite, and I would become an anti-Semite if this is what the Bible presents as a description of the Jew. This, unfortunately or fortunately, was what Moshe had planned on. And what does he say? Lo elech, I won't go. I want to return to my country. We are speaking of a high-level soul. The Zohar says, as well as the Ari, that Jethro was an incarnation of one of the levels of consciousness of Cain. He had returned for the purpose of amending the sin of Cain. There were three people, three individuals, and the reason we say three, because in every individual concerning this mundane world, we all have three levels of consciousness. They have code names referred to as Malchut, or as crude spirit, Ze'ir Anpin, as spirit, and Neshama, which is Binah, soul. These are three levels of consciousness, the highest of which is Binah. Three people return in this one generation to amend the three categories of Cain in his sin, and they were Jethro, Cain in the soul level of Cain, then came Korach, who followed the portion, again, a description of people who stirred up trouble, Korah, and the Egyptian whom Moses slew in Egypt. These three people came back to amend Cain. The only one who actually succeeded was Jethro. The only one who succeeded was Jethro. Korah did not succeed. Neither did the Egyptian that Moses slew in Egypt.
He was what, in a level of Nefesh?
Oh, Jethro? No, Nefesh, Neshama.
Oh, he was already in
That's right. That's right. He was to tackle the most difficult aspect of Cain's correction. And he was successful. And therefore, being a very high spiritual conscious individual, we are told by the Zohar that he returned to his land because he was going to seek out souls that he knew were Jewish. And when we speak again, I don't want to dwell on this subject because we've discussed it on many occasions, and that is, Jew only means one thing. It is that individual. He could be in the body of a Jew, and he could be in the body of a non-Jew. But it's that individual who has the greatest intensity of a desire to receive. That is what we call Jew. Now, whether one is born Jew or not born Jew does not preclude like Rabbi Akiva, who came through Gerim. Why? And we once discussed, why did he have to come through converts? And who was Rabbi Akiva? That the Talmud says in Tractate Shabbat, that when Moses was chosen to be the leader of Israel, to be the messenger, the channel by which revelation would take place, Moses says, but there is someone of a higher level of consciousness than me, and that was Rabbi Akiva. And whatever the discourse was and why he wasn't chosen is not for our discussion now. But Rabbi Akiva was destined to arrive as a Jew by virtue of another route, the route of non-Jews, because of the similar explanation that there is something in what is called Jew, but he was Jewish. He was Jewish, but he would also get the taste of not being Jewish. And of not being Jewish, while that could sound very revolting, nevertheless, I defy anyone to explain how Moses, the leader of this nation of Israel, and who achieved a level of consciousness that in this very same portion, and it is not in chapter 12, including within this the story of Miriam and her slander on Moses. What does the Lord say? My servant Moses is not so. He is trusted in all my house. With him do I speak mouth to mouth. Nobody else. Only Moses. He was a trusted servant. And why was he a trusted servant? Because also in this portion of Beha'alotcha, it says suddenly, like out of nowhere, that Moshe, Aish Moshe Anav Ma'od, he was a very humble person. And the Zohar explains, what does it mean humble? Moses is writing how humble he was. Obviously, he's not showering himself with some praise, but rather that Moses was a total channel without any form of desire to receive for oneself alone. He was a pure channel without any adulteration of a desire to receive for oneself alone. That's what the word anav meant. He no longer represented the I for himself. He had completely canceled out the I, which is the essence of what Jew is, the epitome of I. So all within this same portion, Moses then asked him to come. And he said no. And maybe he felt that he would accomplish more outside the land or the nation of Israel, because there were other souls, as Moses before him went to take souls that were not in bodies of Jews, meaning those who were born Jewish, and he tried to speed up the process, grab those Jews in non-Jewish bodies and turn them into the soul with a Jewish body. But you know what that produced? Bedlam, the golden calf. Because the Jewish soul with the Jewish body, states the Torah, is a menace. I'm not saying this, but this is the explanation. Now we can gloss over this and forget it. And maybe that's why we shouldn't learn the Zohar. He is too critical of us. But again, I think he was Jewish. And so we can't accuse him of being anti-Semitic. And when he said, I want to go back, Moses then turns around and again and says, but the ultimate is still going to be to transform or create the transformation of the Jew in the Jewish body. While you may have an easier job, an easier task of drawing out those Jewish souls in non-Jewish bodies, but nevertheless, help me out, because I've got a mess here. And he thought that with the support of Jethro, and another factor, that like Eliezer before him, he could be a trusted servant. He could be a trusted servant. And I believe that could kind of clear up this little incident.